Hi, everyone. Huge thank you for joining us today for a discussion on how to refactor without killing morale. We had a bit of a glitch at the beginning of the recording. This is a lead dev webinar created in partnership with Coder. The webinar is going to last roughly 45 minutes, after which we both, myself and the panelists, are going to go to the lead dev Slack channel to respond to any questions. So please head there if you have any additional questions. We may also have some time at the end to respond to the questions, so please add them to the Zoom Q&A chat and we'll see what we can do at the end. Okay? And let's start, however, with the introduction. So my name is Simone. I'm head of engineering at Kraken, part of the Octopus Energy Group here in the UK. And with me today, I have an incredible panel. I have Sabrina, Melita, and Nikki. I would like now, can you all introduce yourself? Maybe Sabrina, if you want to start.
Sure. Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Sabrina. I'm a principal engineer at Pleo, where we build smarter spanning for businesses. I've been in tech for over 20 years, and I really enjoy working in long-lived applications and systems and to see them growing and evolving. So that means I had lots of opportunities to go through rewrites, refactors, migrations, and projects like that throughout my career. And yeah, how to be great at maintaining and evolving those systems is something I'm really passionate about. So I'm really happy to be here today. Thank you.
And we are too. Thank you for being here. Nikki.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nikki Pike. So I am the America's Field CTO for Coder, where we build cloud development environments that are AI enabled to help developers be more productive in their roles. I've got over 30 years of experience in this industry. I've done everything from helping build Xbox Live to running the internal platforms for CVS Health and working at VMware and Broadcom. My passion is I've learned that apps are eating the world, so whatever I can do to help developers be more productive, bring out their creative side, that's what really drives me.
Thank you, Nikki. And Melita.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Nelida. I currently work as a senior software engineer in Bex Technologies, a logistics company based in Germany. I've been in the industry for about 15 years, spanning different countries, the United States, my home country of Mexico, and now Germany. And of course, very excited about the discussion today.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I'm too. I'll be honest, this is a topic that I'm really passionate about. First, when we talk about refactoring today, it's not going to be the refactoring that you do, in your PR. There's more things, there's more refactoring. It's more like the thing that takes a bit of a longer time and it requires some planning, and sometimes it doesn't go as planned. And I don't think I never met like an engineer that's like, oh my God, we need to do this refactoring. It's normally the opposite. It's normally we feel like we don't have enough time to do it. Or they told us that we're gonna do it, but now we don't. It's not the right time, and so on. So normally there is always a high expectation. However, big refactoring are also the things that are the hardest to do well. And when it works, it can massively improve our team velocity, developer experience, long-term maintainability. So there are value in those refactoring. However, sometimes to get there may be some hiccups. And this is what we're gonna cover today. We're going to try to understand from the lesson learned that we had in our experience, trying to figure out what option we have, what kind of strategy we can apply to make it succeed more often. And also, how to keep, on the side that there is morale, how do we keep morale high at the beginning, in the middle, at the end? And so the first question is really like a really round table question. So I'm going to ask you all to give me an answer. That is, tell me a story of a refactor that didn't go as planned, and what happened. Nikki, I know you have like quite an emotional story. So do you want to start?
Well, so like I said, I'm a platform guy. This isn't my story to tell, but it is a great story that, really talks about what happens when a refactor goes wrong. So in 2008, Dig was at the top of their game. This was something that everybody was playing with. There was even something known as the Dig effect, right? A mention on Dig would crash websites because of all the traffic they got. They were looking at like a $2 million valuation, and they wanted to go back and they wanted to refactor. They had this monolithic architecture that they thought was holding them back, and they decided, hey, let's do this right. So they started. 2 years it took them. What was supposed to be a modernization and a refactor effort was quoted as being, it was marched haphazardly forward for nearly 2 years. And what really happened during those 2 years is they started losing a lot of talent. There was this death spiral of talent where all their senior engineers were leaving. Nearly everybody that understood the original system was leaving the company. Their CEO left the company. And they had problems with, development tools. They were giving, as people left, they were giving these zombie VMs to new developers that were coming in. And nobody really knew how to fix their dev provisioning system. They didn't know the code as well because they were losing all that tribal knowledge. And one of the engineers even quoted this. This was one of the worst considered strategies that he had ever seen because they were doing a complete rewrite. It was new languages, new databases, and a new architecture all at the same time. So August 2010 arrives. They had, they were supposed to release this, before. They were supposed to release it in April. It got pushed to August. There was a lot of excitement in the air when they provisioned this new architecture out, and their website started crashing. And it started crashing over and over again. They had engineers that were frantically rewriting code in real time, just try to keep the thing up. The worst thing about this was they couldn't roll it back. Everybody that knew the old code, that knew how to run the old code, had left the company. So there was nothing they could do. They were kind of trapped in this broken world of the refactor. And this wasn't, what they saw. It wasn't about, bad code. It wasn't about bad architectures. It was what happens when a company and engineers get tired, they get worn out, and they start to do this exodus, right? They're not preserving their institutional knowledge. They've got very bad timelines. They keep jumping forward, and they tried to boil the ocean with their refactor. So, the impact of this was, their competitor, Reddit, saw a 230% increase that month that they tried to release this new code. That $2 million company that was valuated ended up selling a little bit later for $500,000. This refactor basically killed Dig. And when we're talking about refactoring without killing morale, we're going to talk about practical steps to kind of help prevent this. But really, what you're wanting, it's not just about unhappy developers. This is something that can destroy a company if you don't really take a look at it and do something well.
Yeah, I didn't really know the story, but I don't think I experienced something like that. But I certainly experienced like a extreme pain point, not only from engineering perspective, but the overall company. So,
yeah,
Sabrina,
it's become a master class in how a bad refactor can really impact companies, and hopefully nobody ever gets to that point. I think this is probably the worst case cautionary tale. But it is a good signal. It's something that every engineering manager and company leader should be thinking about when they're talking about doing a refactor.
okay, thank you. Sabrina, what about your story?
Yeah, I have a similar story, not as drastic, I guess, and with a happy ending kind of, but yeah, spoiler alert. But at a company that I used to work, we merged with another company, and that engineering team was going through a rewrite, complete rewrite from scratch of a concert ticketing application. And there was a new system being built. The architecture was super clean and modern. It looked amazing, like this, using all the greatest technologies possible. And in the meantime, the PHP like monolith application was in maintenance mode, but it was actually the application that they were using to sell all the tickets. So really wasn't really maintenance mode. The full rewrite had no end in sight. And when we had a huge artist that wanted to sell tickets on our platform, we were super excited about it, but there was no way that we could use that new shiny new project because we had all the kind of framework for it. We had all the bones for the new architecture, but we had no features. So the feature parity between the legacy application and the new one was nowhere near done, and we had no idea when that was going to happen. There was no one had mapped out all the features that the existing application had, and the new application needed to support as well. So we had no way of knowing when we would be done with that rewrite. So we took the measure, I guess, of pausing that rewrite and using the legacy application and putting our efforts into making that more stable, more observable, so that we could, trust it. And yeah, so that was kind of our story. We ended up scrapping that rewrite and taking a more gradual approach, which we can talk about, in following up. But yeah, that was a big one. And another one that's kind of maybe also less drastic, but an interesting example where we were taking a gradual approach for a rewrite. It was, again, a monolithic application that we're trying to break it up into smaller pieces. But we actually, the first piece we took out was actually the wrong seam. It was the wrong part to break it apart. But because we had just done that one kind of end-to-end slice to take it out, it was easy for us to test it and see, okay, actually the developer experience here is not as great. It's slowing us down. We broke things apart, but they actually still quite coupled. So let's put it all back together and then find the seam again. So those are two kind of stories of rewrites and migrations that come to mind.
Thank you. Thank you. Interesting. Nalita, what about you?
Yeah, so a few years ago, I was part of a team maintaining a large iOS application. And we have this goal of extracting core logic into a Swift SDK. With the intention of reusing that logic into different Apple platforms like the tvOS app, the Watch app, and even a new iOS application with a very specific use case. So we kick off the refactor with two goals. First, modernize the legacy Objective-C code base by rewriting in Swift. And second, isolate this core business logic into a stand-up module to be reused. From the technical perspective, it made a lot of sense to the engineers reduce duplication, cleaner interfaces, and being able to work on all these different Apple platforms. But the adoption didn't go as planned. We built the initial structure and we migrated a few features into the SDK, but the team was under constant pressure to deliver new features. And on top of that, Swift was at that time very new. So tooling was immature. Interoperability was a huge challenge, which make it hard to integrate into the existing main application. So we ended up using the SDK for the watchOS app, which was written in Swift, and for this new application, but it was poorly adopted into the main application, and we ended up with duplicated logic in the SDK and the main app, which was completely opposite to our original goal, which was sharing all this core business logic into a single module. In hindsight, the SDK become a second class citizen, and yeah, it was not adopted, unfortunately, as we hoped for in the beginning. And we will talk about lessons learned, but yeah, for now I will leave it. I will leave it with that.
Okay. And you hear those horror story, and you think like, who are those idiots that are gonna do something like that? And the truth is that all of us, because it's easy to think about that at the end when everything, and you look back and say, ta-da! But sometimes it's hard to do at the beginning. And there is some work we're gonna find out that are required to do that more smartly. And so sometimes there is like, this is a lot of work. Maybe we should just do it. Just do it. Sometimes it kills you. So let's understand now what are those early signs. So given that it's easy to look at from after it all happened, what are the early signs, early warning that a refactor may be in trouble, that you're not going the right direction or you're not approaching the right way? Sabrina, I'm interested in your first example, for example. So did you have some early signs?
Yeah, I think it was not having those clear milestones of what we're trying to achieve and the full understanding of the scope of the product and the features that we needed to support. So when I spoke to the engineers that were running the migration, it was like, this is what we can do once we have this architecture, this is what it will look like, but the the end goal was clear, but the steps to get there wasn't, and the focus on the value for the business, so the product that we're trying to support, wasn't there as well. So those were really good signs of like it's more of a theoretical rewrite rather than a practical one, like concrete, like, you know, with the clear eyes, like open eyes of what it actually means to rewrite an application that's been running for a long time.
Does anyone else has all the early signs or early warning type of vibe that you could capture?
I would definitely say when you start seeing, pressure affect your quality. So when you start seeing, rubber stamping on your code reviews, when test coverage starts dropping because you're getting that pressure of we need to ship, that's something that to me tells me that there's a problem. You're starting to now work towards a timeline versus the quality of the product. Maybe you took on too much. Maybe you are, you're going the wrong direction. I think as Sabrina said, they went down and they broke it up and they found that they did the wrong place to kind of break that up. But when you see your testing start going down, you start seeing regressions come up and start getting answers like, we'll fix it later. Those are, to me, that's a clear sign that something's going wrong for you.
Okay.
Yeah, I can also add to what Sabrina and Nikki already said. When engineers also start going back to the path of less resistance, right? And defining these clear goals about the refactor, trying to make them small as any other feature, so you can start integration and identify early what are the problems with the integration, right? Like, for example, in my case, we had a lot of problems with interoperability, and it was hard to integrate with the main iOS apps. So ideally, you start getting some small milestones that you can start integrating into, well, in my case, the main application, so you can identify early, yeah, what can you do to improve, perhaps testing, make or the selection of the technology itself, putting into place documentation and testing to make sure that you have you make adoption easier, and engineers don't have to fall back to the path of less resistance and just doing things in the existing code base.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll also add, really watch the communication of your teams. When you start seeing your stand-ups turn more into status reports instead of how are we going to fix problems, I think that's a clear sign. When your stakeholders start coming in and asking, hey, when is this going to be done, instead of how are the features coming, that is something else that feels like to me is a clear sign that something's going wrong within your refactor. You really want to watch for those kind of morale indicators. In my story, people leaving, that was huge. That's something that needs to be looked out for as well, or people starting to polish up their resumes. You really want to pay attention to the communication and morale of your team. They'll tell you a lot about what's going on under the covers.
Yeah, super interesting. You both start touching into the solution part. So it's kind of like, let's dig in, because it's kind of like, I feel like we're telling this terror story and people are like, okay, what do we do instead? So, Nikki, you picked on something when you mentioned, and I want, I don't know, maybe someone to comment on that. That is, what's the best way then to get buy-in from leadership, product engineers? So you mentioned, people start joining and say, "So, how are you doing? How is the refactoring?" That's a sign. It's true, but it's like, what's the strategy? How do you get buy-in? And I don't know, Sabrina, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. I guess for like leadership and business in general, other stakeholders, it's more about what this work is going to enable. Ideally, they wouldn't need to worry about it, right? So in the ideal use case, like you're shipping features and in parallel, you're doing the refactoring and the improvements that you need to do. Like you're cleaning up the kitchen while you're cooking the dinner, whatever the metaphor is. So you want that to be the case, ideally. But if you get to a point where, it's not possible anymore, we do need more people involved in this, it's going to impact the delivery of features, it's going to impact the business, then you need a business case. Like it has to have, right? We're here, like we're getting paid to do a job, like we need to make sure that we are delivering value for the business. So it depends on what you're doing and kind of what your business needs are. But it might be, to support scaling, it might be to modernize tech because it's impossible to hire for that particular technology that you have or whatever it is. But it has to be aligned with what your business needs, right? So if that example that I gave about the technology, like maybe it works if you are hiring, but if you're not hiring for the, for the foreseeable future, then it's fine to have, to not have the newest and latest technology. So finding a business case. And then for engineers, I think it's having that clear technical vision of like, what are you trying to achieve and what are you trying to get to and the steps to get there, and being very clear about the trade-offs. Again, it depends. Like I keep repeating that, but it does. And we could have endless discussions about what solution is better, but in the context of where you are, the organization that you are, the people that are there, the technology that you're using, the business that you're supporting, that context is the one that's going to guide you and help you make those decisions. So be very clear about those trade-offs and the steps that you're taking to get there.
I do want to dig into something that you said there, Sabrina, about building the business case. I think that's extremely important. But one thing that I've seen a lot of teams do is their business case is very generic. They're not very specific about what their business case is. Don't come in and say, we're doing this to reduce technical debt. Be very specific about what the outcomes are going to be. Say something to the effect of, hey, this is going to reduce our deployment time by 30%, or this is going to reduce, we're spending $15,000 because our engineers can't release features fast enough. I think if you make those very specific, not only does it help with the buy-in because it gives a real tangible result, but it also helps you set what is good for that refactor. These are the metrics that we have to meet in order for this refactor to be considered successful.
I really hope you're enjoying this video. Do you know Lead Dev offers way more than this?
I'm a fan of the Lead Dev newsletter. I find really practical knowledge about leadership.
Then I was like, oh, there is this big community here doing all of these content, so let me figure out a little more, let me dig in a little, what do you have?
So make sure you check out leaddev.com.
Yeah, and taking from what you said, Nikki, about being specific, is how can you be specific about the business and the business value? For me, getting buy-in about a refactor starts way before to even start a refactor and trying to propose something. In my experience, it begins building relationships across teams and across different levels with your fellow engineers, staff, managers, directors, and really take the time to listen carefully, be empathetic about their point of view, what's important for the company, and what's important in their eyes, because that will help you to understand, not only understand the perspective, but even if it makes sense to make a refactor. That's an important question to answer, right? And you don't go as individual contributor, that you don't go just for the purely technical part, that it makes sense. It makes sense because you have talked to all these people and they have all these problems, and you can tailor your message for all these different contexts, and how it will add value overall. So for me, this effort is ongoing. It's not just also a one-time conversation. Is something that takes a lot of time to build, and building the trust and the relationships with different people to gather insight on again, if it makes sense to do this refactor, and then when it's time to explain the value, you can show the value in these different contexts for different people.
Yeah, also very important, you mentioned, I think it was your story that you were talking about Swift being a very new technology and that caused some problems. And there was this interesting study put out by Hosting Advice where they found that like 71% of most refactors were driven by hype, not really need. And I think that's something that we really got to dig into too, is, everybody wants to do the new and shiny, but it may not be the best thing. You want to look at, I would say, if you're going to consider a refactor, go in and look at pain points. What are the things that each one of your stakeholder groups is really looking for? For engineering is usually pretty resistant to do a refactor because, hey, things are working fine. Why do we want to change it? But, what's giving you guys calls at 2 a.m.? How can we fix that? Where are we slowing down our velocity for the product team? How can we fix that? Don't just go because it's a new technology. Make sure that you're really addressing something the business needs and that they want. It makes life better for everybody.
I'll be honest, I've been thinking about the good old days where you would change just because it was trendy. I feel like it hasn't been the case for the past 3 or 4 years. Mm-hmm. Certainly not for me. Let me pick on something else because we talk about buy-in. We talk a lot about buy-in as almost something that you do at the beginning, almost like you got buy-in and then it's done, check, and then we move on. So, is your experience is buy-in like is there a difference between buy-in and different phases of the project? It's kind of like, do you need to get buy-in from different stakeholders in different phases? Is there a peak buy-in at the beginning for some and then different for others during the day? I mean, how do you see it? Nikki, I know you had something in your mind about this question.
Yeah, I think, my take and my experience is a little bit different from everybody else's. Most people think that getting buy-in at the start is the hardest thing. I don't think that's true. I think that getting buy-in at the start is actually the easiest portion of getting buy-in because you've got, you got this business case, you've got all the pain points you're going to solve. People are excited about the refactor because, hey, it's going to make a difference for us. Where you really start to see buy-in be necessary and where you really got to kind of buckle down is in the middle phase. When you're actually starting to do that work, people are starting to get a little bit tired. Your timelines are maybe starting to slip. That's where you've really got to kind of buckle down and really concentrate on getting the buy-in. When you're getting towards the end, everybody's kind of getting desperate for results. So I think, buy-in it's almost counterintuitive. Buy-in is highest when you really kind of need it least, and it's lowest when you need it the most. And so I think you've got to plan for those cycles. You got to plan for the fact that this is what's going to happen. Here are the stages we're going to go through. Everybody's going to be excited. Then we're going to start getting a little bit of fatigue, and then we're going to start having timeline pressures. You need to actually plan for that and have a process that you can go through. Celebrate those wins as they come, no matter how small. Make sure that you're really communicating out to the team. Here's the things that we've accomplished. Here's the value that we've brought. You want to make sure that, especially when people start getting tired, that you're communicating the quality that you're bringing. I would say, every week you're showing something new that's coming from the refactor. You've got to keep the excitement up. You've got to keep people really interested and engaged into the refactor. And you need to be willing to adapt because, as both of our stories kind of threw out there, things change. There's the old statement, no contact, no fight plan ever succeeds the first getting punched in the face for the first time. And you're going to get punched in the face when it comes to a refactor. So be willing to adapt, know what's going on, and make sure that you're keeping all of your company, all of your stakeholders involved. That's where you really need to concentrate your buy-in is in those later phases, not the very start.
Interesting. Thank you. I certainly experienced the same. I certainly experienced like the fatigue toward the end. I think Sabrina mentioned something like that. I remember that when it's easy to migrate at the beginning, but then you have the tail end. Is there something that you want to share on that space?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with everything that Nikki said. And I think it's still hard to get that buy in the beginning, but it's a different set of people and it's a different context, I guess. But that's where you have the most attention. So that's quite like if you're making a case, you're yourself are also putting a lot of effort into it. So it's also your own kind of morale. In the beginning, you're excited. You want to put the effort to get that project going. while it starts, this is something that's lasting for, months or years even, that's very common for both yourself starting to feel like, okay, this is still going, this is still what I want to do. There are more things that I can be doing, but now you know about, you're the person that does this project. So, oh my God, what can I do? And then for other engineers, or for people that you want to start using the new, platform or libraries that you're building, like Nelida's case, they need to start, using those. So how do they get excited about that? And kind of you're asking them to do a change. How do they get excited about those changes? I guess my main take is to break it down, have very clear milestones that are on it themselves, they have value, and also find breakpoints. So find points where you can actually say, this is a good place where we can pause this work. If we never continue this work again, we already have something valuable that's better than what we had. So we're not in a messy state. We're in a good enough state, not the perfect state, but a good enough state that we can pause and then maybe do something else. Release a new feature, change something, do something that's kind of making the team, forget a little bit about that project and then go back to it if it's still valuable, revisit the reason why you're doing the business case and the goal that you have, and then see if that's still a good thing for you to pick it up. So first, break it down in milestones that deliver value, but also find those times where you can pause and you can say, is this still the right thing for us to do? And I think for other people that are outside the project, it's about communicating. I think Nelida mentioned, Nick mentioned as well, we need to keep talking about it. Don't let them forget. And I think branding is also important in this case. So making sure that there's a good story behind your project, that you have a good name, maybe a good logo as well. I don't know, something that, keep people remembering that this is still happening, this is still valuable, this is still important. A little bit of humor is important as well. So I would pick those things up as ways of making sure people don't forget that this project's still going, still ongoing.
Thank you. That's very insightful. I want to really switch a bit not gear, but just switch topic in a way. And the reason is because I don't want that people in the audience just think that it's all about the commercial, the buy-in. Because there is another thing, another aspect that's very important. Sabrina, you touched on it a bit. That is the structure, the plan of the refactor. Is the design decision you're making the refactor. How do you build optionality? How do you have the safety net around you? What if there is a multi-pronged refactor where there are multiple teams working on it and one depends on the other? So who want to talk a bit about structure and plan for refactor to give stability, but also deliver value early or pull out if needed?
I want to kind of comment on something that Sabrina brought up, which I think is very important when you're doing the structure and refactor, which is having those circuit breakers, having those exit points. I think that is absolutely key. When you are starting a refactor planning, you need to be realistic about what you're going to get done. You don't want to oversell that. And you want to make sure that you do have exit points. The market changes, the company's perspective changes. So being able to have the circuit breakers and those kind of exit vehicles, that's the way you want to structure this, because as Sabrina, I think you put it perfectly. If you have to change your plan or if something stops, at least you still got value out of the refactor that you've done. You're not concentrating everything into a single plan. You're not trying to boil the ocean again. You're providing incremental value each and every time. And that way, if you have to, shift or you have to pivot, you're still providing the business value. You're still getting something quantifiable out of what you've done. But it all starts with that planning. And a lot of teams, I think, go into and say, hey, we're gonna refactor everything. No, break that into small chunks. Make sure that you are prepared to quit, because the simple fact of the matter is you may not finish what you've got planned. There's all kinds of things happening. So plan for that up front when you're doing that initial buy-in, so that you can have those exits and you can provide value even if your plan doesn't go to fruition.
Yeah, having retros specifically targeted to these refactors, like Nikki mentioned, to avoid falling into the sinking cost fallacy, right? Be ready to say, yeah, this is not working, and always keeping in mind, again, the context of the business and that you're constantly getting that insight from from different people in the company to make sure that you are still going in a good direction.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know if you want to touch on this space, but it's also like, what are some of the design approaches that we've been taking to make life? I've been thinking about like, like interfaces, or building the strangler pattern, or something that allow you to or build on top and build on the bottom, and then decide when to pull off. Anyone has some experience in that space that want to share?
Yeah, you brought up different patterns. One that I really feel strongly in is kind of value ordering. Hit some of the low hanging fruit, those things that have high value but are low risk. Hit those very early. That not only helps bring the excitement back to the team, but you're getting value very early in the project, again, in case you have to kind of move around that. The other thing I would say is there's the old phrase, perfect is the enemy of done. You talked about UI. Make sure that you have very clear, definable goals at the start so that you can know what good looks like. And you can say, this is something, these are our non-negotiables. These are the things that we absolutely have to fix within the refactor, and make sure that you don't see that scope creep coming in as you're going through it where, oh, well, while we're doing this, let's just go ahead and change that. That is the quickest way, in my opinion, to derail a project, is to go outside your scope. Finish the things that are non-negotiables first, then go to your should-haves, then go to your nice-to-haves, and make sure that you structure the feature sets and the metrics that you're trying to get out of this refactor in that way.
And a approach that I really like, which is like related to the one you mentioned, the strangler fig, but it is to think about the end-to-end slice, at least for the first few milestones. So pick something that's from the developer that's writing the change till whoever is getting the value out of it. It would be a customer, an internal customer, another developer, whoever it is, right? So something that would exercise it end-to-end in a thin slice, and maybe something as Nikki is saying, low-hanging fruit. But I would even say then maybe after that, pick something that's quite risky, or at least think about your milestones as things that you're delivering value and you're learning from as well. So try not to do like the same thing like 5 times in the beginning, at least, because you're trying to learn. So try to make sure that at each step you're learning something new about this refactoring, this rewrite, and that you're getting some more information, because as again, we all said here, like you start with all the good intentions, but there are a lot of things you don't know. So make sure that you find those out as early as possible.
Brilliant. Thank you. And then I would feel bad if a conversation like that ends without talking about AI. Mostly because it's like you can't really have a conversation right now without one, right? So, but if it's an area where I'm being interested, AI to the help refactoring. I heard about it, and I wanted to know if someone has some experience in it. Have you used any tool that support refactoring work? What are approaches and benefit have you seen used? Nikki, I know for sure that you have something in mind, but potentially also Sabrina and Nelida may have.
Well, I mean, this is right in our wheelhouse. This is kind of what Coder helps with. Going back to that hosting device study, they found that 86% of all developers, they were using AI as part of their migrations or part of their modernization effort, and over 80% of them were saying it was more helpful. And you got to ask why that is. Well, at its core, AI is a pattern recognition, and it's a pattern recognition at scale. It finds patterns and it helps you aggregate those patterns into something that's better. That's where this really helps, is because you can go through with AI and you can spot patterns across wide code bases much faster and much easier than a human ever could. It would take weeks for humans to go in and find some of those patterns. We've got our authentication system is in 47 different files, and it's slightly different in each one of those. How do we find those and migrate those? The one thing I will say is that while AI can do that, you really got to have the right infrastructure for it, because there's a lot of fear about AI right now. We're hearing the battles of AI will take all developers' jobs, or it's so poor that nobody should use it ever. It's somewhere in the middle, in my opinion. It's growing, it's learning, but you want to do this in a place where you don't provide a lot of risk to your code base. So you want to have something where you can run AI isolated, where you can control, put boundaries around what it's getting to and what it's not. But when you really looking at some of these refactors, documentation and spotting those patterns is something that AI can do much faster, and I would say even better than human eyes can, but we don't want to remove that human factor, right? AI does not know what good looks like. It is not creative. It has to be led. Somebody has to come in, and that's where the engineers come in to say, you did good here. This is what good looks like. I want you to do more. And they also have to spot when AI goes off the rails, because it does. That's just the fact of the matter. Sometimes AI does things you don't want it to do, and you don't want to spend hours, on your local environment trying to back out and reverse engineer everything that AI may have done. You want to be able to do those in small controlled steps, and you want to do it isolated.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I have not used AI specifically for refactors so far, but Nikki mentioned, engineers leaving, and sometimes you're working on these large legacy code bases that, like, all the people that knew the ins and outs of it are gone. So I think this is the part where AI really can help, get this context from the existing legacy code bases, and even even asking advice, right? Like you said, again, it has said it's we need creativity as part of the process, but you can use AI to gather what some ideas of what improvements you could do, given the legacy code base that you're working with, and get that information much more faster than going through the code and trying to get understanding.
Thank you. We have some questions from the audience that before we wrap up, I would like to respond. So let's see if we can do that in a few minutes. So the first is about, how do you correlate refactoring practices with DORA metrics and communicate it? Do you have any particular example to talk about? So is there any example you have on DORA metrics? That's one. The second one is a bit correlated, but I think let's respond to this one, and let's see what learning we have for the second one.
I'm guessing, do they mean like improvements? So showing I've refactored this code and therefore the metrics improved because of that? Is that? That's what
I think, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think it's about how can we show that some of the refactoring we do connect to some of the DORA metrics, and if we have some example around it.
Yeah, I don't know if I have specific examples of DORA metrics, but I think in general, like metrics that we used were around like developer experience. So they were around how quick our tests could run, how quick we could deploy to production, and things like that. So I've used it as part of a project to break up like a monolith application, and that was very useful. Like the more numbers you can have, the better it is, the easier it is to show value.
Okay. Thank you. And I have not, you want to go, Nikki?
Oh, I was just going to say, along those same lines, you absolutely, and I think this is kind of going into another question that we're going to see, but you want to relentlessly measure everything. When you're doing this, you have to provide value from what you're doing. So, have very good metrics, actually time things that are happening within your application. We see all the time where people say, oh, this performs very well, but when they actually get in and start measuring it, they see that it's not performing as well as they think they do, because they didn't put hard numbers to it. They're being subjective about what they're measuring. So, part of both the refactor plan, but even leading up to the refactor, is really having an idea of what your application's doing, having those metrics, and just relentlessly, I do mean relentlessly, measuring everything that you do. Because not only is that going to give you the points of things that you need to go look at to refactor in your application, but it's also going to prove the value of the refactor as you're going through it.
And this lends well to the last question, and then I need to park it. That is, this is going to reduce deployment by 30%. How do we make this sort of quantitative statement ahead of actually doing the refactor? Given the experimental nature of the refactoring, how do we convey the value of the product ahead of time? I got to respond to this one. And because it's a bit almost like in opposition to what Nikki said, I think sometimes because we are engineers, we are overthinking about those measurements. This is only in engineering. I mean, if you look at marketing, if you look at sales, sometimes that kind of half make up the metrics. What I mean is like, you don't need a data scientist to come up with metrics. So obviously don't go for precision, go, even if it's like, I don't know, counting number of hours that it took you to deploy the last time versus the number of hours it takes now. Maybe it's kind of fine if it's average on top of a number of releases. So don't be over concerned about the perfection of the metrics. I think a ballpark metrics is better than none. And now I've wrapped it up just because we need to go. So we learned a lot today. We learned that refactoring is great to do, but that sometimes it's like we need to be careful. What we learned that we can use like a great buy-in techniques that the team have shared on, and use that buy-in, you need to do it across all projects. And at the same time, we also learned that there are ways in which you can actually structure your plan and structure your design to make your life easier. Now we're all going to the Slack channel from Lead Dev to respond to any other question that you may have. So I'll see you there. Thank you so much for the panelists to join me today, and thank you all for joining. See you next time.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Likewise.